Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all manner of strange and unusual literature that I have found in my travels or that I may have been ordered to read by the vampire who has been unhappy with the actions and atrocities I committed against them. So today it is Short Story Tuesday, another fantastic day to talk about one of my favorite forms of literature, which is, there aren't that many, are there? But where you can tell a beautiful story in a limited form. Sometimes it's wonderful, sometimes it leaves you wanting more, but it's always fairly interesting. Uh, Today I am talking about a collection of horror short stories um, that range from the supernatural to the terror of your fellow humans, I guess. So what I am going to be talking about is After the People Lights Have Gone Out by Stephen Graham Jones. I don't have a physical copy on me as it's on my Kindle, but it is a fantastic book, and I'll probably put the book cover right here because it is a very interesting and spooky book cover, in my opinion. For those that don't know, Stephen Graham Jones is a pretty well published author. He's been writing books for years. I don't think he has a lot of awards under his belt, but he does have a fair amount of literature that I've heard plenty of good things about. Um, One book that stands out to me that I haven't read is called Demon Theory, which is sort of a haunted house kind of story written in the form of like a script, which is pretty unusual, but it's pretty interesting. Stephen Graham Jones is known for uh, writing sort of Native American horror or touching upon Native American themes in his writings. That is possibly because he is a member of the Choctaw Nation, which satisfies one of my goals here, and that is going around the weird. So finding not only what is considered unusual in indigenous cultures, but also what is considered horror within indigenous cultures. Something I feel like we don't talk about enough. Um, there is the myth in the Navajo Nation about the skinwalkers, but one of the interesting things about that is you can't really ask that many Navajo about the skinwalkers because they often don't tell outsiders about the skinwalker legends or people who they don't trust in general. So it's really hard to learn about some of the more interesting myths of indigenous cultures because you're not a member of the culture often. So the book that I will be talking about is After the People Lights Have Gone Out, which was written in 2014. It contains some short stories that were written previously, and the one that I will be focusing on today is Welcome to the Reptile House, which is a pretty interesting short story. So, Welcome to the Reptile House focuses on Jamie Boy. I think his name is just Jamie, but other characters call him Jamie Boy. Uh, he is sort of a punk. I don't think this character is Native American, although based on the other stories, he might be because there's some stories that take place on the reservation. I don't really know, and I should just lump that category in there just because the author is Choctaw. But Jamie Boy is a bit of a punk. He's a bit of a jerk, a moral derelict, a scrug on the bottom rung of society, and he hangs out with his friend Dell, who is similar to him. And they get in all sorts of trouble, and there's a bit of family trouble between Jamie and his sister, and Jamie and his father, because Jamie is a bit of a liar and constantly like uses his family, and they've sort of turned their back on him. They still interact with him, but they know he's probably there's no hope for him really. At this point in the story, uh, he's become a tattoo artist, and he's doing fairly well, but he needs more work to become uh, to get his own shop for one, but also to make his way in the tattoo studio that he's already working in. Uh, One day, his best friend Dell comes up to him and says, "I know this place where we can help you practice your." Um your tattooing skills. Let's go there and we'll do that. And it turns out this place is a mortuary, which Jamie's a bit hesitant to go to because like he's worried that Dell is going there to have sex with the dead bodies. Uh, but it turns out, maybe he just likes sitting next to a dead body, I guess. There's nothing inherently unusual about going to a mortuary for fun. But Jamie practices his tattooing. He tattoos X's over the eyes of a person with gunshot wounds in their chest. They're almost caught by like security guards, but they manage to get away from the mortuary without a problem. A few days later, while Jamie is going about his business, he finds out that Dell is dead. He was splattered across the bricks of a building, and at first Jamie believes it's just because Dell is kind of high strung and like he does drugs and he's kind of like out there, so maybe he just got into a fight with the wrong person and that person killed him. But later it's revealed that it's another reason entirely. Uh, what's strange to Jamie is that Dell's girlfriend is now hanging out with a mysterious biker uh, who seems to view Jamie with a little disdain at times. Jamie goes home and he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he discovers that biker is in his apartment with him. And at first he's like, "Oh, well, this guy obviously killed Jamie. Now he's coming after me." But when the biker turns to him, he said, he like puts the hair out of his eyes, and it shows that there's X's on his eyes. And it turns out that was the guy he tattooed in the mortuary, who's come back to life. And Jamie realizes that this guy is a vampire, and he made a giant mistake. Like, the vampire is not happy that he has X's tattooed over his eyes, and he says, "Well, I'm going to kill you and possibly also your family, because I already killed Dell's girlfriend. Dell's girlfriend is in the bathroom, like bleeding to death and dying. He made sure not to let her turn into a vampire, though." So he says the only way that you're going to get out of this, and maybe you won't even get out of this, is if you fix the tattoo on my stupid goddamn face. And so, because he's familiar with how tattoo artists often have to fix others' mistakes, he manages to do some work that is satisfying, all while the vampire has his balls in his hands, which is agonizing. But daylight comes, and the vampire says, "We'll finish this tomorrow or when night comes, but you'll be watched," or something like that. While the vampire is gone, Jamie gives himself a tattoo, basically as a way of like working out how he's going to fix the problem, and also giving him some more body art, possibly as sort of like a last sort of exercise of his artistic ability. And then he goes into the bathroom and he starts drinking Dell's girlfriend's blood. And he realizes, much to his horror, that he's become a vampire. Because although he wore gloves to avoid cross-contamination with the vampire, he did tattoo the vampire, and then he tattooed himself. So the vampire's blood is within him now, and he's a vampire now. He's dead for all intents and purposes. Jamie reflects on the tattoo that he now has on his chest, how he's become the dragon that he's tattooed on his chest. And he also thinks about how he's probably going to try to kill the vampire as soon as he gets the chance, because the vampire threatened him. And so this seems like his only way out now, especially with his probably improved vampire strength. And that's the end of the story right there. So overall, I would say not only did I love this story in particular, because it definitely wasn't going in the direction that I thought it was going, and it was a little terrifying, and it was a little innovative with its idea of vampires. I also love the After the People Lights Go Out, the collection as a whole. I haven't read through all the stories, but I did read a couple, and they were all very different and very creepy and unsettling, and especially when you read them at like 2:30 in the morning. Yeah, as I mentioned, it is creepy, and how Stephen Graham Jones reveals that this guy is a vampire is actually a pretty interesting way. because he comes in, he takes off his helmet, and then there's still like bangs covering his eyes, and so Jamie just kind of disregards him. But then there's this part. Then shaking his head to get his oily bangs out of his face. I nearly screamed. His eyes. There were two crude X's tattooed over them. Two X's I'd done. When his when he was cold and dead on a rolling cart, two bullets punched through his chest. So he's talking about how like he recalls from the previous night tattooing this dead man, and now here he is. Turns out he wasn't a dead man this entire time. And so one of the themes that I picked up there was like your actions have consequences, specifically here defiling the dead. And it's interesting that like Jamie is like hesitant to hang out with Dell at the mortuary because he's like thinking about how Dell probably like has sex with the dead people, but he's so totally willing to just tattoo the dead people as if there's a difference, because you're defiling the dead in like uh, in both ways. So in a way, this is like his punishment for having done such a terrible deed on a someone who was presumably dead. Uh, and so that's something to think about there. This also reminded me of a short story from We Love Anderson Cooper called Tattoo. Um, uh, R.L. Mazes describes like sort of a magical realism situation where the tattoos sort of come to life, and it's entirely possible that the X's on the guy's eyes, like it didn't make him a vampire, it just brought him back to life and made him angry about it. Although that's me like jumping to a conclusion that's probably not there. But still, I do see some comparisons there, and I think it's interesting how you can get some horror out of tattoo in general. I also think this is Stephen Graham Jones creates an interesting way to become a vampire, because the usual ways that people write, like you can drink the vampire blood and you become a vampire, or the vampire can kill you and there's a specific ritual that you got to go through and that's how you become a vampire. But this way, it's sort of an accident because the vampire just has plans to kill Jamie. He doesn't want him to become a vampire at all, and instead, like Jamie accidentally uses the tattoo gun, highlighting how he's not very good at his job, and like he ends up cross-contaminating and getting the vampire's blood in his system, and that's how he becomes a vampire, which I've never read about before. I haven't seen that kind of way, and I thought that was very creative. And like Stephen Graham Jones does a great job of sort of introducing another kind of vampire introduction into the world. And I would say that most of the horror that Stephen Graham Jones does in this collection is kind of unconventional. He does a horror here. He does a haunted house story that doesn't exactly fit into the typical haunted house um, genre. Like it's haunted, but not because of ghosts, but because of the guilt that one feels for actions that happened there. And that was the titular After the People Lights Have Gone Out, which I recommend. Again, like Welcome to the Reptile House is good. After the People Lights is also good, or After the People Lights Go Out is also good, and I recommend like getting this entire collection based on those two short stories alone. So the horror is a bit unconventional, and it was definitely a different way to experience a scary story. My only complaint is that some of Stephen Graham Jones' writing is hard to follow at times. It really seems like he's trying to do something different with horror, because as I said before, it's unconventional. And I got the same vibe with Mark Danielewski, but whereas Danielewski was being arrogant and The House of Leaves, Stephen Graham Jones seems to be trying something different and not exactly connecting with it. Uh, there was a short story called This Is Love or something like that, where I had a hard time following what was even happening with the characters. And another critic even noted, like, am I not understanding this because I'm too dense to understand it? Or am I not understanding this because Jones misses the mark? And I think it's a little of both there, which is the only shortcoming that I can say I found while reading this. Overall, I loved this. It was morbid and terrifying and absolutely just bizarre, and a very welcome change of pace for the short stories that I've been reading thus far. it does make me want to check out more of Jones's work, Demon Theory in particular, and I think that might be something that I check out later. Probably, yeah, definitely at a later date, just because I'm a little tired out from horror at this point. Between reading I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream and House of Leaves and After the People Lights Go Out, I'm a little like hesitant to read more horror. Just because I'm tired of feeling dread, especially because there's so much dread in my normal waking life. I don't need it in my fictitious life at this moment. So I might wait until like maybe October to explore more about that. Otherwise, if you read the story or if you want to comment about anything I said, just leave a comment below. I'd love to have a discussion, especially about this book. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people may find out about such glorious horror, or that you may learn more about the stuff that I read in the future. Until then, I wish you a weird time in your travels. Have fun. Goodbye.